that's the time that we should be seeking that kind of help and assistance.
Okay. I know that there's never like really a right time or a wrong time rather to seek help. A lot of people like to keep things shut in, and the old saying is what goes on in this house stays in this house, and when you cover up stuff it can't heal. So at some point you have to rip the band-aid off and seek the healing that you need. I have recently sought you as a therapist, but then I've also gone farther to see a psychiatrist. I wanted to do that because I'm adopted, and I found my biological family in 2010. They still call me by my birth given name, and my family that I was raised with, they call me Latanya. So, um, telling the therapist all of this, the psychiatrist all of this, and answering her ABC questions and multiple choice questions, she told me that I have ADHD for one, and also borderline personality disorder. And I laugh because I shared that with Dee Dee, and I also shared that with Travita, and they're both like, "Yeah, I can see that." And I never understood why they could see that until I was able to step back and look at me trying to be the person that pleases everybody, so to speak, and I can't do that, because I'm abandoning myself.
Makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
That
So
makes sense.
my questions are, what would you say to somebody that has that particular diagnosis? How could you help them?
Okay, so we'd be much longer on this broadcast barely answered that question because therapy is like peeling back an onion. So do
Right.
y'all remember watching like older movies where you see the therapist and somebody come in the office and laying on their couch, and the therapist would start out saying like, tell me about your mother, right?
Mhm.
Now, by the way, we don't have people laying on our couches anymore. We don't practice therapy like that anymore. That's what we call a little bit old school. But certainly, if when you see people, you do want them to be comfortable.
Right.
People are ambivalent about laying on couches and stuff like that. So I thought I'd throw that in. But when we talk about ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because ADD is attention deficit disorder, but when you have the H in there, that's hyperactivity disorder. So, in layman's terms, that's kind of like a person who can't really be still. They're really hyper, they can't be still. I work with 25 children in the public school system. Out of those 25, at least 23 of them have one of their diagnoses, because some people sometimes have duo diagnosis, such as what you described. They
Mhm.
have they have ADHD. They can't sit still. They can't focus. They have when people who have ADHD have issues being able to focus and hone in on things. Here's the good news about ADHD. So there are psychotropic meds for them. One of the older ones is Ritalin. I think that most people are familiar with, but they don't really use Ritalin anymore. There are others that use. But now I will tell you, because I'm not a psychologist, but a therapist. I don't prescribe meds, though I am asked to sit in and I'm asked to give my suggestions as to what kind of medicine people should be taking. I am not a big advocate of psychotropic meds, but I'm also not a person that's going to say you don't need meds. I leave that clearly up to my client, but I
Right.
will educate my client about what kind of medication are you taking, because they do come with side effects. ADHD happens to be one of those mental health disorders that can be managed with good diet, with exercise, with doing some other holistic things other than taking psychotropic meds. But there's nothing wrong with it if you do. Personality disorder. Okay, so that's another mental health disorder that sometimes you don't really get to see that one manifest until you get like in preteens, somewhat kind of like in preteen. You start like with kids, you start noticing personality disorder. They may change their clothes a lot, something like that. And so by you, I seeing you smile, you probably might be a little bit familiar with that. The tricky thing about personality disorder is that, because of hormonal imbalances, sometimes
Hmm.
that can it can look like you have a disorder, but it could be hormones are being imbalanced. So
Oh,
um, I've worked with a great majority of my clients come from foster care and or they've been adopted. And so it's really hard sometimes, or challenging, I would say, for persons that come from those kinds of home environment to establish what exactly is their personality type, because they spend a great deal of their lives trying to adapt to other people because of the rejection factor.
mhm,
So if I'm doing therapy with a person that has personality disorder, we want to try to help that person to really hone in on their authentic personality, finding out what exactly it is that, dealing with the rejection. Of course, being in foster care or being adopted, there are abandonment issues. And so when we deal with those kinds of things, it will, in fact, help when it comes to personality disorder. And that's just kind of the short answer I'm giving you. But
Okay.
kind of where we would need to start is peeling back the layers so we can hone in on what is your authentic personality, who exactly are you, and then being able to accept the person that God made you, that and so you can accept yourself, and knowing that other people will accept you too. And not everybody's going to accept you, but
Right.
rounding yourself with those people who accept you and love you for the authentic person that God has made you.
Why do you think it's so hard for African American males and females to seek help?
That's a great question. And again, that's one of those topics that I particularly love to talk about. When I'm asked to come and speak in public, I'm usually asked to speak about mental health and the African American community. So let me try to keep my answer short, because that's when I start getting on my soapbox when it comes to African Americans and mental health. So you can't talk about Black people and not talk about our experience when
Right.
it comes to mental health. It's impossible to do so, because um, uh, people who have been traumatized, or a person, let's say a person who has been traumatized, rape, molestation, physical, emotional abuse, it is going to affect their psychology. So when we talk about us, and we talk about the diaspora of the African, right?
Hmm.
We gotta multiply what would be the traumatic experience of one person. We now got to multiply that times over 450 some odd years. That's a whole lot of trauma, right?
mhm,
And
Right.
you got to think about a group of people who've been traumatized in multiple ways, having experienced that amount of trauma. even in 2025, we're still working that out. But the short answer to your question, um, our experience as a culture, we knew that talking about how you felt meant death. Short,
Mm,
that it meant death. So it's something called learned behaviors. So we
Mhm.
learned not to talk about.
Mhm.
That's why we still do it in 2025. We learn not to
Mhm.
talk about those kinds of taboo subjects, not to talk
Mhm.
about how you feel. First of all, because nobody cared about how you felt.
That part.
See, nobody cared about it,
Mhm.
especially for the black woman. Who cares about how you
Mhm.
feel,
right.
right?
Mhm.
So when you've been a culture of people that has been trained from your great grandmother, your great grandmother passed that behavior down to her daughter, and so on. Then you get a group of people who have learned who have learned to not feel safe talking about their emotions.
Mhm.
Okay, because we have a history that if we talk about what's really bothering us, we're going to get in trouble. So this is where we still have those learned behaviors of not feeling safe. When we
Mhm.
start talking about sensitive subjects, start talking
Mhm.
about how I've been traumatized, because some trauma, especially for women, but now boys too, okay, happens within your family unit. Okay,
Mhm.
more or less
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
So this is where we get the saying, and I believe you started out the show talking about that. What goes on in this house stays where? In this house.
Yes.
Because we
Mhm.
learned to not talk about things. Black people are infamous for just covering up stuff. But we have
Mhm.
found, thank God, that we have found out that that has really not worked for us, because all we have done as a people is internalize trauma. But that's kind of a basic answer, Latanya, as to why we don't talk about things that have to do with our mental health. We don't talk about traumatic experiences and so forth. And then years and years ago, not that long ago, I would add, I'm talking maybe even not 20 years ago, there weren't many people who looked like me who were practicing therapy. So
Right.
if you did find yourself with a therapist, it was going to be from the other culture. So now we
Mhm.
have to ask the question, how many black folks was going to feel comfortable sitting and telling a Caucasian person about their
Mhm.
trauma? Well, our
Yeah.
our history says no. I'm gonna feel safe telling you about our trauma. So thank God that now in 2025 we have more people who look like me who are practicing therapy. Thank God for that, and that
Yeah.
offers a level of cultural cognitive competency, if you will. So that makes people feel a little safe to say, I'm talking to someone who looks like me. And people are embracing mental health more now. We still need a whole lot of work in that area, but that's one reason why, as a culture, that we don't really uh, dive into mental health and wellness. It also, there's a financial disparity. Sometimes people can't afford it. Depending upon if you live in some rural areas, you don't have access to it. So some
Mhm.
of our social disparities as a people and as a community kind of hinders us, or serve as roadblocks as to why we don't engage in mental health and wellness.
A
I
lot of
got a yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Um, my question is this: do you believe that the stigma's still there? I know growing up back in the day, it was like if you went to a psychiatrist or anything, they deemed you crazy. Do you believe that stigma is still here today, or are we more open now to not feeling like crazy, but in a need of having some help?
I think that your question is very valuable, Miss Dee. And to answer your question, yes, I think the stigma is still there. This is why it is very important that we do what we're doing tonight,
Mhm.
that we're having the necessary conversation. Because the
Mhm.
more that we don't talk about these things, then the more ambivalent people are about disclosing. So what it, as a practitioner, what I hope to do, and other practitioners such as myself, we want to have more conversations like this. In your family, you should have conversations about mental
Mhm.
health and wellness. In your community, if you're over a women's group, whatever sphere of influence that you have, if you're a manager of 4 to 10 employees or what have
Mhm.
you, if you're the CEO of a big corporation and you have employees, you need to have that conversation, because in having the conversations, we begin to normalize mental health and wellness. It becomes a normal thing for us to talk about anxiety and to talk about suicidal ideation. So we have to have the conversations in order to normalize the things that are not normal, but to normalize it so that we can all begin to feel a bit more comfortable about doing it. Because Miss Dee, for example, right? Because I heard early on, but I just happen to know that you all, and maybe some of the people that are listening to us tonight, typically in the Christian community, right? You
Hmm.
Mhm.
call your sister on the phone. Hey, sister Dee Dee, how you doing? What is our typical answer we gonna say? I mean, what's like,
I'm good. I'm
I'm
okay.
I'm good, I'm
I'm good.
blessed, I'm highly favored
Uh.
of the Lord. God is still
Yeah.
blessing me. So
Yeah.
I have something that I developed in my women's community where, number one, I periodically tell women, check on your strong sister. Check
mm,
That
on your
part.
strong sister, because she's
That
probably the
part.
one that needs it. And so I usually encourage women, you have two sisters in your life, check on that sister. Just ask them,
Yep.
how are you feeling? And ask them, how are you feeling for real?
Yes.
We don't want the King James version, because we already know
Exactly.
we've been
Exactly.
conditioned to practice that
Yeah.
answer, and we're
Yeah.
still covering stuff up. Sis,
Yep.
how are you feeling for
For
real? I
real.
just want
Yeah.
you to know, if you need to talk, I'm here. This is a safe
Exactly.
space for you if you need to talk. So we need
Yeah.
to do things like that. So we, again, Miss Didi, we can destigmatize what we have thought, or the ideology of mental health and wellness. And no, it does not mean that you're crazy, because it's okay to not be okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
It's okay to not be okay. What's not okay is to not get help. That's not
Yeah.
okay. But it's
Yeah.
okay to not be okay. All of us at some point in our life, we're not going to be okay. And it's
right.
Very
okay.
true.
It's okay to not be okay. That's
Mhm.
everybody. There's nobody's exempt from that. Even the therapist needs therapy sometimes. It's
Right.
Yeah.
okay to not be okay.
We're human. We're gonna need that. We're gonna need that support. That's something to lean on. So I like that response because I grew up being the strong person. So when my family found out through the podcast that I was suicidal growing up and a cutter, it shocked them.
Mhm.
Why? Because I was the strong one. Yeah.
I totally get
But
it. And just so we know, for the purpose of psychoeducation, cutting, or what we call self mutilization,
mhm.
is very prevalent. I have several clients who have engaged in cutting or self mutilization, and it's typically girls. It's typically girls that
Whew.
that self cut.
Wow.
And with self cutting, it is a very secret and private thing.
Mhm.
When you're a cutter, as we call them, um,
Mhm.
it a person could be cutting for months and months and years, and you never ever know it. And that's why, moms, you need to check on your girls. Help them
Mhm.
roll up their sleeves and check on them.
Yes,
Because
Right.
please.
you will notice that girls that are cutters, they're going to wear long sleeves even in the summertime. See, that's
Mhm.
not normal. And so check
Mhm.
check them out sometimes. And because
Yeah.
girls cut, because cutting gives you a euphoric feeling, gives you a kind of a rush. But what we understand about it from a spiritual perspective is that that's a self esteem issue, that you're harming yourself
Mhm.
because you really don't like
Yeah.
yourself. You don't like the
Yeah.
skin that you're in. So
Yeah.
thank you
That's
for sharing.
exactly it.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what the issue was.
Why do you feel like therapy is so high? A lot of people can't, they don't do it because they can't afford it. Why is something so simple so hard to obtain?
Well, for a lot of reasons, because like I'm a therapist, a girl got to eat, got to
Right.
pay mortgage, got to pay, but that's just that's just
Mhm.
typical answer. I mean, so sometimes therapy can be high, because it depends. If you run an agency, you have a lot of overhead that you have to take care of. You may have staff, and so fees sometimes are dependent upon that. I myself practice community therapy. Community therapy means I'm not getting the big bucks, right? I go out in the community and I see people, and I will always do that because Jesus said when he came, he said, I didn't come for the people that are well.
Right.
I came for the sick. And so I know just through observation and in my own life and in the lives of people that I love that the need is greater in our communities, right?
Mhm.
So being a community therapist, then I have an opportunity where I can waiver fees. Sometimes I can modify fees, things like that. And there's more therapists now that are doing that. They're doing income-based fees. It's just a matter of what it is that that where your heart is and where your passion is. But it mostly is the overhead. People think about what they've invested in their education, but we know
Mhm.
that everybody can't afford to be paying $150 to $200 an hour to tell
Mhm.
people their problems.
Mhm.
Do you believe that mental illnesses start at home? Like growing up in a home where the parents aren't on one accord, they're not equally yoked, they're not doing things together to maintain the home, and then the child, the one that's left to somewhat fend for themselves, is that like the beginning of mental illness?
I don't think that it is the beginning of mental illness.
Okay.
I think that living in a toxic environment exasperates what's already
Mhm.
there. So let me give you a for example. So a lot of people said COVID in 2020, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
COVID made people have a lot of mental health problems. That's not true. Mental health problems were already there.
Mhm.
Maybe they were hit. But
Mhm.
COVID, which was a nationwide crisis or a worldwide crisis, right?
Mhm.
The
Right.
world traumatized. It exasperated
Yes.
what people were already
Already
secret.
dealing with it. Mhm.
So a person can already have mental health issues, but when they live in a toxic environment where their needs are not being met, then it exasperates what is already going on
Mhm.
in a child. You
Okay.
see, so this is why I have 25 kids that I do therapy with in the public school system. I do not take on a client that is a child unless a parent agrees to be a part of the process. I don't even take a client on like that because
Mhm.
I know and I believe that the key to healing for a child is a parent, whether it's a one parent
Yeah.
house or a two-parent household or a grandma. I have a client that's
Yeah.
raised by her great grandmother. But
Mm.
Wow.
it is important for parents to provide a safe environment for their children, because if they don't, then the issues that are in this child, they're just going to be further exasperated if that child's not getting the kind of care that they need to have.
Hey, yeah, that's the truth. That's so true.
What can we do as a community to lift each other up and inspire each other to seek therapy?
We can do what we're doing right now. We can have conversations about it. Um, John Maxwell said the one word definition that John Maxwell gives for leadership is influence. So
Hmm.
everybody, even those that are watching tonight, those of us that are on this platform, those that will watch the replay, ask yourself, what is my sphere of influence? Am I a manager on a job? Am I a mom? Am I a grandma? Am I a dad? Am I an uncle? Am I an aunt? Do I have a podcast? Am I over a women's group? Do I have am I part of a women's ministry in my church? Whatever group of people that you interact with on a regular basis, that's your sphere of influence. Whatever group of people, whether it's 3 or 300 or 3,000, whatever group of people that listen to you, that's your sphere of influence. And so when you identify what your sphere of influence, for example, Latanya and Miss Didi, your sphere of influence is this platform right here, right? Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
is a space that you ladies know that when you get on it, that people are gonna listen to you. So then you say to yourself, how can I bring in these kinds of conversations to my sphere of influence? If you're a parent, you're a grandma, you're a mom, you're a dad, how could I possibly, maybe one night a week, that we have a family talk? And in the family talk, we talk about mental health and wellness. So we talk and we share. So I would say do what we're doing tonight, right? Have the conversations. You don't have to have a whole big worldwide something. Whatever you have, use what's in your hand to talk about mental health and wellness. Also, you can bring in people like me, and there are other people like me that look like us that we could bring in. But I would definitely say that we need to have those conversations, and we need to have real conversations. One of the things that I like that you did, Latanya, is that you started out this conversation talking about yourself. And I think that took you to another level of healing when you did that, because lots of times when it comes to women and women's groups and women's organizations, we tend to put on big facades, right? Because we think those are the personalities that we need
Mm-hmm.
to have, right?
Yeah.
Personality disorder, since we did talk about that tonight, a great part of that is learned behavior. We learn that we have to have a certain kind of personality in order to be
Mm-hmm.
accepted, right? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so disclosing yourself, like for me, I have no problem. They used to say back in the church about your testimony, let me tell it because you can't tell
You
it.
can't tell it.
I tell it. Yeah.
And so
Yes.
I'm of the same persuasion. I can tell about me. I can talk about
Yes.
that, how I went 5 years after a terrible divorce and I was in major depression. Okay. This is why I know what depression looks like. I know what it
Mm-hmm.
feels like, what it smells like. And this is why, as a result of me experiencing that, now I didn't have clinical depression, but because I had that experience, this is why I like to share that with other women and help them to heal. So that's what we can do
I
to speak about.
feel I feel as though God gave me this platform for that purpose and that purpose alone. Um, I was born with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and I talk about it often. Our awareness month is October, but I talk about it every chance I get because I live with it every day. And I feel like in order for other people to feel free, it has to start with somebody. So why not me? So I step out and I expose myself because I'm not perfect. I don't have everything together. I'm actually going through a divorce,
We both are.
going through menopause and other kind of pauses, and it, having surgery. I just had surgery 2 days ago. Um, and I was able to hop on here tonight and have this conversation because it's important. And I feel like we women should lead by example. Each one teach one. We're waiting on these men to feel comfortable enough to have the discussions themselves, but they can't have the discussions until they know it's okay for them to be vulnerable and talk about the things that they feel and deal with mentally, and things that they don't share with their spouse or girlfriend or mother, sister, whatever. Just creating that space of freedom means a lot.
Hmm. I agree.
I agree. I agree, and I think that is very, very much needed. And like she said, we both actually adopted. Both have spina bifida. So any chance we get to at least try to put anything out there to let people know that there's a lot of stigma on a lot of things that aren't true. There are information out there that are not true. Like we can't live perfect lives or we can't live good lives. You know what I'm saying? Because we have that, and that's untrue. And just because we're going through through divorces doesn't mean that we still can't be who we're supposed to be and be loved on like we're supposed to be loved on, like God has called for us to be loved on. So it's a lot of things that we're both working through and learning for ourselves and learning ourselves again, after the divorce. So I really appreciate
Travita
you
just
coming
said,
on.
like Travita just said, having the conversation without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Sit high
Exactly.
enough to look low on
Yeah.
somebody else, on our neighbor or what have you, because we all go through something. It may not be identical to what the next person is going through, but we all endure some sort of mental challenge.
Yeah.
And doing so, Dr. Carolyn, do you have like exercises that you give to people to help with that?
Yeah. So if you're talking about anxiety, so I work with a lot of women who are professionals, such as yourself, women who are CEOs, entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur myself, a CEO myself. And so, two of the main things that we're going to see with women um, who have careers like that, anxiety is going to be number one. So, some of the simple things that we can do for anxiety is deep breathing. There's not a day that I don't practice deep breathing on a regular basis, especially when you become overwhelmed. Doing 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds of deep breathing is definitely going to help. I'm a multi-sensory person, which means that I like smell, I like texture, and so it's important to have nice candles around. Okay, create a quiet space for yourself. Like take time out in the day for quiet time. I'm a lover of classical music, so I cut everything off, and for an hour, I listen to classical music, whatever it takes for you to quiet your spirit down and to quiet your brain down, because a lot of the social media and all the things, the TVs and all that, it creates a lot of noise in our head. And
Right.
with that, and working on projects and maybe dealing with your family and all that, it can exasperate anxiety. So those are a couple of things that I would suggest that we could do to quiet our minds down from being so busy. Prayer is number one, though. Of course, prayer,
Absolutely.
prayer is the
Absolutely.
absolute number one thing. that we should practice in our lives. But along with prayer, every morning I pray. I don't do it. I drink water and I pray. That's my morning routine. That's what I do every day. I don't answer calls, messages, nothing. I drink water, I pray, and then I meditate. You might have some people that have issues with meditation. I do biblical meditation because it's important that you quiet your spirit down before you start going into the day, and then take time out for yourself even throughout the day to shut everything off and set boundaries for yourself and tell people, I will get back to your call tomorrow. I will answer calls on tomorrow. Do whatever you have to do to take care of your mind first. And that's what I call, when I talk to CEOs and professional people, that's what I call minding your business, because without your mental health, you can't tap into your wealth. All right? So you got to take care of your mind.
What
Okay.
um what advice would you have for somebody learning to meditate? Because sometimes I've tried it, and I guess because of the ADHD, it's hard for me to just sit still and sit with myself. And because I'll be honest, I've tried it a couple of times, and I'm like, why am I just sitting here and there's nothing happening? I can't quiet my mind. It's like I have 50 different things going through my mind at once. And the moment I say, I'm going to try this, is when the wheels start turning, and I'm pulling myself in 50 different directions and I can't focus. So what would you say to someone who wants to heal themselves by meditation, but they don't quite understand what they're supposed to be doing?
That's a really good question, Latanya. So when we David talked about meditation, he said, I meditated on the Lord day and night, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So for the person who is hyper in their mind, my son who is now 30, right? He had ADHD. I knew that he had ADHD when he was about 6 years old. Boys tend to grow out of it. Girls typically don't, right? But I
Mhm.
knew that he had it, and he was super hyper. He was jumping all over the place every day, all day, that kind of thing. One of the things that I did with my son is every day I required that he take 10 minutes to shut off everything. I said, you got to give me 10 minutes. Just 10,
Mhm.
cut off TV, cut off the video game, give me 10 minutes of nothing but quiet. The only thing you can do is read a book. And
Yeah.
it was hard for him at first because, having ADHD, the mind is saying one thing and the body is saying another, right? So that's what happens. But so I would recommend take it in small doses. Start with 10 minutes a day. My son is now 30 years old. He practices that every day of his life. He's a military man, and he does sometimes 30 minutes a day, sometimes an hour a day, because he realized that he needed. So my advice would be, when it comes to quiet time, number one, take it small. Start with 10 minutes a day. The other thing I would recommend, as far as meditation, do something called guided meditation. You go on YouTube, there is tons of meditation type music, or there are people who are speaking scripture while you're quiet. I do that at night, sometimes to get to sleep. So guided meditation, hearing another person's voice while you're sitting and being quiet, that will help to block out some of the noise. So I think doing those two things would really help.
Okay.
Mhm.
Didi, do you have any more questions you would like to ask?
I do have just one more question. Do you find that this day and time, is it still more women acceptable to wanting to do therapy, or men, or is it just about the same?
Women are more acceptable for everything, girl.
Got that right.
I agree.
Got that right.
But I will say this: I have male clients who I
Right.
absolutely enjoy. Now, a few of them have started coming to me because of their wives. But my male clientele is growing because
Okay.
you have more men who
Mhm.
are beginning to realize that there is something wrong. The thing is, when you go to a therapist, you don't have the answers, and sometimes you don't know what's wrong. You're not
Mhm.
like a Latanya who got a diagnosis. You just know something in my life is not going right.
Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so I would say yes, on average,
Okay.
statistically speaking, more women are uh, more susceptible to talking because we talk anyway. That's what we
Yeah.
do as women, right? We just
Right.
talk anyway. But there are a
Mhm.
growing number of more men who are
Right.
accepting of therapy, who feel, believe it or not, men have a lot to say. We society just
Mhm.
oftentimes doesn't give them an opportunity or a space to say it, but men have
Mhm.
a lot to say. And if men are in a space where they feel safe. See, I'm a safe
Mhm.
space because I'm not the wife, I'm not the girlfriend. You know,
Mhm.
I'm a safe space. They can speak more freely. But more
Mhm.
men are a lot more susceptible to the concept of talking with someone, being engaged in therapy because they want to get better. They do. So more men are on board when it comes to that.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Well, Dr. Carolyn, how can people reach you for appointments if they are in the area uh, that you cover?
Sure. So you can go to my website. It's www.drcarolynstevens.com. Or if you want to take the www dot off, you can just put Dr. Carolyn. Just don't put the period after doctor, but drcarolynstevens.com. There's a space on there where you can make an appointment. And you can go on there and peruse around, and you can reach out to me like that. Another favorable way to reach out to me is on Facebook. Um, my personal Facebook page is Carolyn Stevens, right? You just go on Facebook very discreetly. You can just send me a little message. Now, you don't have to tell me all your problems when you message me, because if you want to be discreet, but just say, hey, I'd like to talk to you, and that's fine. I have people that come to me and say, Dr. Carolyn, I'd like to talk to you about a friend. And that's fine. If you want to talk to me about a friend, I don't issue. I don't have an issue with that. And so those are ways that you can reach out and talk to me. And by all means, please reach out. Please reach out to me. If it's not me, then reach out to somebody. I am in the near future, within the next 2 months, I'm going to be establishing some group therapy sessions. So these will be comfortable spaces where women can come together. You don't have to be visible to be a part of the group, but you can be with other like-minded people who share some of your same symptoms and diagnoses and be able to do that. So I'm developing some other things that women can come together and making normalizing the world of mental health and wellness. But please, by all means, Facebook or my website, that's how you can reach out to me.
And do you have any parting last words you would like to put out there in the atmosphere, Dr. Carolyn?
I would like to say that Jesus wants us well. That's
Hmm.
what that Jesus wants, and let me personalize it. Jesus wants you well. He wants you to be well. He was known as the great counselor. So I believe that Jesus believed in mental health and wellness, right? Because he ministered to the mind. If you break your arm or you cut your hand really badly, you're not going to think twice about going to ER. You're not going to think twice about calling your doctor and say, hey, doctor,
Mhm.
something's wrong. Why let that be any different for your mind? If your mind has been injured through trauma, through things that you have been through, why not call upon a professional? Why not call upon a specialist so that you can be seen about? Because God wants you to be whole and entire, lacking nothing, He doesn't want you living a secret life of depression, of anger, of anxiety, or any of those other things. He wants you to be whole. And so my last imparting words to you, help is available. God has made help available.
Mm.
Take and access the help that God has for you so that you can live and be that whole person that God has called for you to be.
Amen. Amen.
Dr. Carolyn, I thank you for joining us tonight. I would like to ask you um, if your fourth Fridays of every month are free. I would like to introduce mental wellness to my platform on the fourth Fridays of every month if you're available.
And I would like to come. Let me check because I'm with Black Diamond. I'm not sure if that's the fourth Friday or
It's
what.
because
I don't think it is.
We're
we're
only
all
here for
same.
Friday.
Yeah,
Everybody's doing something
Mm-hmm.
different. But anyway, if it is not, count me there. I would love. Let's have this necessary conversation.
Yeah.
And those of you all that are watching on tonight, and I see some familiar people that I know sending you love, kisses, and hugs. And most of all, I'm sending all of you a lot of peace. Go and find somebody tonight that you love and ask them, how are you doing for real? Want to give everybody that homework assignment. Okay. And most
Amen.
check on yourself. Okay. Do a check. Sometimes people need a therapist to check in. So do a check in if you will. But yes, I'm going to check my schedule, but I believe that's free and I'd love to come and be a part.
we would love
Amen.
to have you. We would
We
love to.
really would.
I do believe that this conversation could possibly change somebody's life, um, change their perspective on getting help. You're not crazy for seeking help. You're not,
Amen.
there's nothing wrong with you for needing somebody to talk to that may not be connected to you through friendship or biological family or what have you. It's
Mhm.
okay. You're okay to seek help.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's okay to not be okay.
It's okay
Amen.
to not be okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
I would
Wow.
like to thank everyone for chiming in tonight, tuning in, and we will be back on the second Monday of July. Um, have no clue what I got going on, but we will be back. And on fourth Friday of July, if Dr. Carolyn is not busy, she'll join Dee Dee and I to continue this discussion of mental wealth and your mental health. I thank you
Mhm.
all for tuning in tonight. Y'all be blessed. And remember, even if it's delayed, if God has it for you, it won't be denied unto you. Until next time, good night.